So welcome to the School for Ecocentric Evolution and Design Strategies. We're so grateful and blessed to be sitting here with Carolina Putnam, who's a cultural liaison and a visionary creator of culture. She's the founder and the director of the Peruvian nonprofit Reviveolution, which has the mission of bridging indigenous wisdom with the modern world through experiential education, earth stewardship, and intercultural exchange. Thank you so much, Carolina.
Gracias.
Yeah, we got introduced to your work through some synchronicities. Just traveling in the area, saw just a poster about this collaboration that you were doing with Rising Appalachia and Penny Livingston, combining, indigenous stewardship with permaculture and musical activism, which was right up our alley. So we signed up and went to the pre-concert ceremony, which was an amazing way to get introduced to some of the local indigenous culture here, the ceremonies and the tradition, meet some people and get inspired, and hear Penny Livingston, who's been an amazing a role model for us as we've been studying permaculture, and then get to take part in the concert as well. And then through all that, we heard you speak a few times and saw that Reviveolution was sort of at the center of this amazing collaboration. We're like, wow, we need to figure out what Reviveolution is all about. Seems like you're doing some amazing work here. So for our listeners and for us, tell us a little bit about Reviveolution, how it came to be, and how you found yourself here in the Sacred Valley doing this work.
Well, I'm glad you were at that ceremony. That was the best ceremony that I've ever participated in. That was
It was really beautiful.
Really special one. Yeah, it felt really nice. So on 11/11/11, I was invited to Peru for an indigenous ceremony by a friend, and it was like an intercultural ceremony of different tribes. And he invited me to it. I'm like, yes, absolutely. I had never been to a ceremony in my life, but I studied anthropology in college, and I was like, yeah, really meeting indigenous cultures, how amazing. My friend didn't make it, and I came to Peru by myself and didn't know any Spanish. I didn't know Machu Picchu existed. And I found my way to this indigenous ceremony, and the avenue that we knew through it was a retreat that was happening, and I wasn't able to afford that retreat at this time, and so I contacted the leaders and just said, I really feel that I'm supposed to be at this ceremony. Can I come? And they said, yes, you can stay in the accommodations with the elders, which is, local price. And so just immediately I was just, hanging out with 4 different nations of indigenous leaders. And they sent me back to the U.S. After that to bring a fire ceremony to a community in Sedona, with the Hopi and the Navajo. And it really changed my life. Those 2 ceremonies, I just felt like I woke up at the fire and was like, what am I doing with my life? I really feel that I'm supposed to be doing something very meaningful, and it has to do with indigenous nations. And a year later, I was invited back to Peru, and I had been having dreams of Reviveolution and building indigenous temples and working with herbs and plants, and I really didn't understand what it meant, but I felt that I was really I was pretty obsessed with it, really couldn't get it out of my mind. And I synchronistically met up with Juan Gabriel in Cusco when I came back, and he was talking about a temple, and I was talking about my dreams of a temple in my very limited Spanish, and he brought me to his home, and his son was visiting from Lima, and his son invited me up to his pueblo, and I was of course, oh my god, indigenous nation, just kind of really ignorant of everything, just a romantic view of everything. And when I got there, I just saw how humbly and practically the people were living with nature. It was really impactful for me, and I guess not too long after, he became my life partner too. So we've been together for 7 years now, and we've been told that we're the first intercultural relationship from his nation. That usually the Quero are with the Quero, or the Quero are with Peruvians, but it's never been with the foreigner. So that's been quite the journey. but just the experiences that we have learned together. You know, I've been bringing my father-in-law around the world, Juan Gabriel, sharing indigenous traditions in South Korea and India and the US and Bolivia, and we go to intertribal gatherings and we share in people's houses, and what we really learned is kind of that bringing the gems of both worlds together. I always share that if indigenous wisdom was perfect in its own right, then there would be no reason that we had evolved forward. You know, it's like, where was the challenge that would provoke us to solve it, you know, and move forward? And so I really, truly believe there's a reason that we have modern innovation. And there's also a reason why we have indigenous wisdom still present today, all together in the same world. And so I really feel that there's a middle path, and that's how we formed Reviveolution, with the intention of bridging indigenous wisdom with modern innovation, and really, you know, presenting some solutions to both the social and ecological issues around the world based in indigenous technology.
That's amazing.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for that. Yeah, your name, Reviveolution, really stood out to us, and you just spoke to it a little bit of that middle path, but we really love the way that you're honoring the need to both revive, restore, heal, repair is what we hear in revive part, and also to look forward for the evolution, and that in this present moment we live at such a unique moment in history where we have some of the possibilities of doing real collective repair and healing work, and to bringing forward ancient wisdoms, and we have this possibility and the urgency with what our world faces to be thinking about 7 generations down the line. What are the technologies we need to be put into place? How did you first come to that name, Reviveolution? You said it showed up in dreams. Like, what is the story with that name?
I was working at the chocolate tree in Sedona, Arizona, and really amazing chocolate, like amazing quality. And they put me on my very first juice cleanse. And just through the process of detoxifying the body and just getting clearer, then it just started coming through it like a dream. I mean, it was kind of like a daydream. I just started like writing on a piece of paper. It just became really clear, and the word Reviveolution, the symbol came through. Temples, doing events, and working with herbs. And none of that really made sense at the time, but I was, like I said, I was really focused on it too. And so that's how it came through. And then over time it starts making sense. I'm like, oh, reviving and evolving forward, you know, and bringing those two together. So sometimes we don't know all the pieces, you just run with it, and then over time start to understand. Same with the land, you know, we didn't understand why exactly we're getting land, and now, you know, just like that permaculture, just observing and sitting with it, and then it starts to reveal what its full nature is.
Right. And it's such an adaptable name, you know, and so when you can hold that broad, that wide container. Same with like permaculture, just the lens in which you're seeing things can hold the expression of what needs to come through. And that's what we're really trying to do too, because we have an idea, a vision, a pull, you know, but we want to be able to be adaptable with that, to listen to what is actually coming through. And so we really see that with your work, so thank you for that.
It's funny that it cannot be said in Spanish. They're like, evolution? I'm like, no, it's not the right kind of, but not really.
The difficulties of it,
I thought about making a Spanish version of it with a C on it. So Reviveolution. So maybe it's like understood a little bit more.
Right. Yeah.
So you've been integrated into this indigenous community here, which I'm sure has had an incredible impact on your life. For us and like our listeners, what has shifted for you in the way you view the world? Because we oftentimes talk about this story of separation that's sort of infected the West, and this sort of egocentric way of viewing the world. And a lot of these ancient indigenous traditions point us back to like an ecocentric way, where we're fundamentally part of like our landscape. So like, how is it your lens shifted from being in this community to being here?
Nice. I love learning English words to what we're like conceptualizing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the indigenous ways often through observation and receptivity, just really getting, like coca. The coca is the mother of wisdom, and so we chew coca to open up the insight and to open up the receptivity of what's going on around us. And so I find that that's one of the major things that have shifted. I feel, in a room of people really, really sensitive to what's going on, and really sensitive to maybe what's being unsaid, not being said. And so again, being not only thinking about myself, but really becoming keenly aware of the community that we're in, or how we might be impacting an area. How to work with medicines as tools for communication and tools for community. And I think one of the longer term things that ingrained is when I have an issue or when I'm celebrating something, the first thing I do is go to the earth. The very first thing, before I like talk my issues out with a friend, I'd go pray it out, and really ask that right support comes, the right medicine comes into my path that week, or that we have the right conversation. That way it's not one of like complaining and trauma. This is another thing in the U.S. There's like the fragility.
Right.
Just learned that word last week.
It's a good one. It really sums up a lot of what's happening.
So fragility. Here there's no concept of being broken, and that we need to heal or solve something. And so there is a being, and I'm interested in doing something, and that's the reason why I'm doing this. Just like this intuitive pulse, and not always this need to fix, but more of a way of being that's consistently in reciprocity and in balance. And so that's another thing, and it's been really curious to work with international students coming, because there is like the trauma drama that comes in. How do you like weave into that and say this is really valid, this is real, but how do you step out of that endless cycle of needing to fix and fix and fix? How can you rest with what is, and how do we acknowledge where our energy is at and utilize the tools to shift it, right? So like my father-in-law is a maestro, and this is what we teach people in our courses, is how to identify energy and shift it forward, rather than needing to go backwards and understand what the root of it is and where it came from. It's like, this is out of balance. I'm going to utilize tools and put it into balance.
Exactly.
And that's it.
Exactly.
So those are some of the concepts that I've been learning about.
Yeah, that speaks a lot to this role that you play in this work of being a bridge builder and cultural liaison. I'm curious about both the beautiful opportunities of that and what you've learned of being able to see more collectively, these international students have a different way of being than the local community here. So some of the things that have been insightful and beautiful, and also some of the challenges as a foreigner to this community that have come up in that role as bridge builder.
I'm going to go with the challenges first. It's been challenging because the way that I came into the family was on a personal basis. And I actually didn't understand that what I was learning is not something that other people learn. Like that it's like secret. And I didn't understand that, and I started being like, hey, we should share this, and then I started to see the resistance over time, and it probably wasn't until 5 years in when my father-in-law one day was sitting in a group and he said, Caroline's been asking me to share, and I think it's time to share. It wasn't until that day that I realized that we weren't sharing.
The unspoken.
And then he really started to open up, and that really propelled our relationship and offering forward. And it's been challenging. Often I often feel like I'm not doing a good job when I have the people come in the retreats, because there's lots of expectations of what the word retreat means and what you would get out of a 10-day anything. And we are really trying to offer an experience of truly how an Indigenous person would learn, yet also meeting in the middle of the comforts that someone would expect in a retreat, right? And so, but it's quite interesting because the things that you learn often come from discomfort. And so how do you share that in a very short amount of time with someone and really have that ingrained? So it's like, you know, we're often used to packets, like worksheets, you know, and like a schedule.
Show me
Lay
what
it
to
out.
expect.
And I'm like, your schedule is chew coca whenever we're late because it's going to happen all the time. Because we're in Peru. Learn adaptability.
Right.
You know, and how do you don't go into the complaining and blaming, but how can you see that those are actually the lessons?
Right.
Exactly.
You know, the lessons are the value of a human being, right? And so those are some of the things that I've learned and definitely not mastered in any way. You know, there's still a lot of friction with my partner. You know, there's just like certain things that he just thinks is so simple as a common human value of respect and patience, and he's like, you know, I'm always seen as like the really fast person that complains and like has a really strong personality. You know, though that's not the only way they see me. Those are some qualities that you can see really clearly when you're not in your cultural context.
Exactly.
You know, in the U.S., I'm considered slow, take my time. She's not a planner, and she doesn't speak a lot sometimes, and then sometimes it does. You know, but here it's kind of, I'm actually on this other extreme because I'm in an indigenous family where the women don't speak as much and don't have as strong of opinions as I do. You know, I'm thinking, you know, planning quite a bit more than an indigenous person might plan, you know, so those are some of the challenges, being able to step out of roles, like into that role when Westerners come and then step back out of it when I'm with my family. So how do you move in between those two mindsets? And sometimes I feel a little crazy. And so, and then at the same time, like, you know, I'm sitting with the Westerners and they want to take notes and stuff, and my father-in-law is on the side like, they're taking notes, they're going to try to copy me, and they're going to try to sell this information. And then, but the foreigners want to do that because that's their way to process information. And then there's like the uncomfortability of the elders. So how do you find the middle ground where everyone feels that they're meeting in the middle in a good way?
I've just been like racking my brain around the challenges of the position that you're in, and being so like new to indigenous ways of knowing, you know, and like trying to learn how to walk in that world very gently and very respectfully. I see, at least what I've seen, is most culture is arisen out of like the land, out of the place. You know, the spirituality, the ceremonies, the coca, all these things come from place, and they're these aspects of culture. But I feel like there's like a rooted way of being that allows culture to emerge. And so for me, it's like, how do I come into a place like this and learn like how to be in the world so that I can go back to my home and like try to grow culture? Because I see the West as being very like culturally impoverished, actually. You know, we talk about Western culture, but I feel like it's actually lacking culture. You know, lacking connection.
Western unculture.
Western unculture. Exactly. And so I see this like challenge of us Westerners coming into a place and then seeing these aspects of culture and thinking that that is what culture is, and then taking those and, you know, hoping that that's what's going to give us something. You know, have you, I guess, like, what is your thoughts on that, and like, have you seen that play out, or how do you navigate that?
I think culture gives us a reference for the world and a worldview, and it very much has to do with plants and place. If you meet my father-in-law, he says, "Hi, I'm Juan Gabriel Apaza Lonasco from the Caro Nation. My mountain is Apuamanlipa, and I come from this area of the world." Right? He's like claiming his whole community. He'll tell you who his teachers were, his lineage, and he'll tell you where he's from. And so I definitely feel that there's a disconnect with that in the Western world. Often when we ask people to state where they're born, they'll often reply, "Well, I'm not connected with the place that I'm born." Though in this culture, you would never say that. That's where you're born. You call that in because that's where your soul came in. And so reconnecting to that sense of place. And then there's also this interesting dynamic of wanting to trace back the lineage, right? You know, trace back our DNA and find out really where we came from, when in fact, like, you know, we come from a mixed culture. And so I think that some of the challenges of coming from a place that doesn't have cultural paradigms so much, like very strongly. For instance, sitting at a table. My partner and I had so many issues the first year because when you sit at a table, if you put the food on the table, you actually have to say come. You have to invite anyone to stay. Like in the U.S., someone sits there, we're all like, I get the biggest leg, I'm gonna have some kale, you know, and like, and we're not like, don't really have to be invited because it's understood that it's there, and then you know we talk over each other too. This is a big thing here that I'm challenged by. Because there's in a conversation in the U.S. we kind of dance between like, oh, we insert it, and then the other person inserts it, and we're kind of dancing. But if you do that here, like the speaker will just shut down. They're like, oh, they're not listening. And so I would say that is the top key for understanding another culture context is listening, deep listening, not coming with an agenda, and listening between the lines too. You know, just deep observing and deep listening, and. From that is where we can really find the common ground of human culture. And so it's interesting because my father-in-law always says there's many paths but one spirit. Meaning there's many different cultural contexts for the same understanding and connectedness with nature, with God, with Buddha, however you want to call that overarching life force that flows through all things. There's many ways to connect with them. And so once you understand as a way of connecting, then it's very easy to see the threads, the common threads, and to understand, like I was just sharing with you, I just went to visit the Mapuches. I'm like, don't know the Mapuches, we've never met, but I was able to understand the context of sitting in another culture enough to sit there in a good way to where it opened up good relations. Yeah, and I think that culture can be, that's funny. I know it's like building soil, like building a culture.
Building culture.
Growing
yeah,
culture.
exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing.
We talk about like the conditions that are conducive to building culture, both like at an individual level, but also collectively. Like just how we might tend to the soil or make sure there's a good water source. That's what helps build sustainable culture.
Human value.
Exactly.
Is that like valuing life, valuing respect, valuing family over work, valuing calmness and meeting over productivity. You know, it's the what do we value? And then from there, and then culture is what's localized, right? And very much has to do with the environment. So growing where you live is going to be different. There's common threads.
Exactly.
Yeah. You were just...
Go ahead.
Okay, you were just speaking about the process of helping foreigners who come and learn here how to integrate that to their local environments in terms of like the plants that are here, what would be a comparable plant where you live. Is that a big thing that you think about? I imagine having both the wealth and the presence of helpers here who are foreign, who are learning, and then helping make sure they're going back and really helping root some of these traditions and ways of being in relationship to the land is probably something you think a lot about.
Definitely. I think that's probably our fuel that keeps things kind of shifting more and more. It's like each time reflecting on a course and then understand like, okay, how can we take it even deeper now? How can we make it even more impactful now? Both locally here and then when people go back. Like often people ask us like, well, we love this practice of coca, but we can't have coca in the U.S. So what do we do? Well, I share tea ceremony as an alternative, and it's really just finding a common vibration, plant vibration that connects us in community and brings about meaningful conversation. And so it's also about slowing down.
Definitely.
You know?
Finding presence.
That seems so important rather than the mindset of like needing to take this particular tradition or ancient wisdom. It's actually about what is the vibrational gift that it offers that helps inform you in your local place of how to be in right relationship and slower relationship with earth and each other.
Yeah, and meaningful for sure. Yeah, it's more about the practice than it is the plant. Though the plant is very beneficial. It's like working with the vibration of where you are. You know, some places it's tobacco, some places it's tea, some places it's, I don't know, yoga.
Totally.
You know,
Listening to the place. Yeah.
So I want to ask you a little bit more about Reviveolution here. We've been kind of talking about some of the learning lessons and some of the felt sense of it, but what is your ultimate vision, at least as far as it is now and what it's formed? Because obviously it's evolving, as you were saying. What's the ultimate vision of Reviveolution here in this community? And maybe even some background of like, what is happening here? This is a place in the Sacred Valley that's been affected by imperialism for hundreds of years, you know, and so what has taken shape? What's the current state of, I guess, indigenous ways of knowing, or agriculture, just the culture here? And then where do you see things potentially headed?
Yeah, like you said, it's definitely ever evolving.
Right.
It always seems to be shifting and growing. Each time it's way bigger, and I'm like, whoa. How are we gonna do that? Yeah, so at a certain point we were sharing ceremonies and indigenous traditions and praying for Pachamama, and I kind of just like woke up one day and was like, whoa, I still buy food at the market, and I know that these people are using backpacks full of chemicals. And so I just woke up one day and was like, wow, my actions are not matching my words. And so yeah, that changed my direction personally into food systems and herbalism, like really having that match, really having that be the physical. So there's like spiritual ways to feed the earth, but how do we tangibly and physically feed the earth? That's kind of what y'all experienced, right?
Yeah.
And so that became my little piece of this. We're like sharing the indigenous traditions, and then like, well, how do we back that up? And that also became a link to the modern world. Like, what can we do when we're back home? And so, yeah, actually, so many people come here and really think that all of this food here is organic, and it's definitely not.
Right.
The marketing corporations hit really hard here over the last 10 years. And came into the land cooperatives and introduced these chemicals, and people are dependent on them now because it's true. There is not. They truly believe there's no way to grow corn without chemicals, and it's because the soil's depleted and it's now dependent on nitrates because it's turned into monocropping, you know, and rather than diverse gardens. And so there are issues now of them being healthy. And so, yeah, when we got to the land, it's totally American. I was like, well, I'm going to show a different model, you know?
Right.
And, yeah, my family, it was so hard. That was one of the challenges, so hard with my family to get them on the eco train. Oddly enough, because, I mean, but you think about it, like indigenous people, particularly the Carolina Nation, went up the mountain to get away from the conquistadors and to preserve their cultural heritage. Did a fantastic job of that. Came down in the 80s, like really started coming down towards the 80s. It's kind of in the 60s, but like actually kind of, you know, more consistently in the 80s. And this is the first generation that have come down the mountain, and their top concern is like, how can we, you know, feed and house 7 kids in the city where we came from a place of no money and trade to now needing to, you know, feed 7 kids and leave them a living inheritance so that they can have a better shot at life, right? So that's the mindset and belief of many of the indigenous people. And so even here in the farms, like, that's why so many people are able to buy farms now, so many foreigners, because this generation is ready to sell off and go to the city, right? And so there's a lot of that happening. There's a lot, like the elders that still know how to grow organically are still alive, so it's not too far gone. Everyone still knows about the traditional techniques. They're just not using them because it's not as effective, efficient, and money, you know? So it's really now what I did, I'm like, all right, so we can make a farm, we can make it biodiverse and organic, but let's do it in a way that we invite others to be part of the process. And so if it results that we have an oasis in the middle of cornland, maybe other people will say, well, hey, what are they doing?
Right.
And so that's kind of what we're doing right now. We're not only building what's appropriate for us and for our desires, but also making it an experiential education school, both for foreigners as well as locals. And so that's kind of what y'all just saw recently, is a bigger step in that direction. So we're now collaborating with our local land cooperative. We've like kind of inserted this, well, let's bring permaculture teachers here and learn from indigenous wisdom of stewarding and courting the land, but also bringing in the modern innovation of, well, it doesn't have to be as hard as, you know, farming you know, a whole hectare of potatoes, like we could do potatoes vertically and with less work, or we can set up diverse systems that's a little bit easier than what you traditionally were doing, but it's going to take a longer term vision of understanding how to set that system up and not only needing the immediate results. And so that's where we're at right now. And I guess the ultimate vision, I don't know if it's a dream, but it would be fantastic to see our entire pueblo be an organic pueblo, and it would be fantastic if that model was replicated to see the whole Sacred Valley become an organic Sacred Valley. That would cut the cycle that we see around the world of like, we already know this doesn't work, so let's bring more people into the system that doesn't work, right? And so where do we cut that and say, hey, like, can I share with you gems of modern innovation? And the gems of the computer is that I know that this doesn't work, you know, and it really doesn't work, and I really don't want to see that not work for you too. Can we just like share what does work together? And so that's where we're at right now, just kind of bridging both the ancestral wisdom and modern innovation to see what does work as a middle path, and we're just experimenting.
But it's really beautiful. I mean, for us who are like on a similar path, and just looking at your vision, your mission, it's so aligned with something we'd like to bring into the world too, because we also recognize a lot of the problems, and we can see them back home in the States, like so obviously. It's like we have all the technology, we have all the knowing, we've exposed all the problems already. Now how do we exactly start moving this in a different direction? And so like I see this as being here and from the outside and coming in and seeing just some of the momentum that you've gathered, and being here at this point where you've brought in music and you're hosting these workshops now and you have this site. It's inspiring for us on our end, and it feels to me like it is already like shifting. Sure, we're not part of this local community. I don't really know like how much it's taking root, but I can feel the energy and the intention and the power behind the vision. So
yeah, the music one was a total experiment. And we're glad it turned out good.
Such a collaborative, because we also, I mean, music and arts are such a part of culture. So to really see the interconnected beauty of the world that's possible, as well as we can see the interconnected challenge and problems of the world that's not working. So beautiful. So inspired by that collaboration of Rising Appalachia.
Yeah, it was like, it seemed like it became a platform for the broader community to understand like some of the work that we're all doing. And then, you know, and then we were able to raise resources to do an ongoing work here where we could actually continue to host the education for the long term. And that was the result. We totally experimented. It was totally awkward when we came into the community. There was like 150 farmers, like, why are all the foreigners here at our meeting all of a sudden? Like, clearly their leader had not told them we were coming. It was totally bizarre. And then we listened. We brought chicha, you know, and we brought music. And then everyone was relaxed. And then we were like, all right, let's go. And we brought in gray water demonstration. And we brought in, what was it, the compost tea. And so then we brought in our food. And everyone tasted the corn, and they were like, wait, this is organic? It's just as big as ours, and it's sweeter. Like, what did you do? And I was like, we did that. And like, we're increasing soil biodiversity, and we're increasing the diversity of the plants that are together, so it's a more protected ecosystem. And they were like, all right, so how can we continue classes now? So that was actually the result.
That's so beautiful. Those living examples of what's possible speak so much louder than, especially probably a foreigner coming in and saying this is how it should be done, really showing what's possible through the effects of different practices, ways of being.
And I've heard a lot in this conversation just around like presence and like listening and slowing down and like just being that in that group. You know, I'm not here to like impose something on you. Like, I'm here to listen and to collaborate and to create connection. You know, because the imposing, that's what's already been done. You can see the result of that. You know, and so I really have, from this conversation, have just gotten a lot of wisdom around that. You know, just like the listening, the presence, the patience, the embodiment, the feeling, the emotion, and learning from it. You know, those are all like really beautiful qualities, and like we talk about the wheel, you know, they're very like south qualities, which is like our place, like in the sun, our place at home in the earth, so.
Yeah, and listening's quite interesting because, like, when we were there, and Penny and others were around me, like, Caroline, what are we going to do? Like, tell me, what's the plan? I was like, there's no plan. There is no plan. The plan is watch, and then no one to enter. So give me a second. And then there was just this moment where it was like time. And we had this whole presentation. We were like over-prepared, of course. And we had this presentation, this whole thing, and I was like, scratch everything, demonstration. This is the only thing that's going to work right now. And so all we did was watch and listen. And then what we shared were meeting on a human level. I'm like, they really wanted to be sure that we weren't making money. They really wanted to be sure that we weren't just like, they're going to break trust and just like talk about something and not do it.
Follow through.
And so that's why none of the farmers knew we were coming. Because their leaders were taking a risk on us. Right? They like felt the intention, but we're like, well, I can't fully stand behind these people until I know what they're doing. And then it was super cool to be invited later by the leaders. They saw that. And they saw that a third of the farmers really interested and wanted to know more, And so they were like, next time we'll help you plan more effectively together now that we understand. And then we'll be sure that everyone here wants to be engaged. And so that's what it turned into. And yeah, that listening is just not always having like an agenda. The agenda was, let's connect with our neighbors and share food and see what happens. Yeah, because we're connecting on a human basic right for clean water, clean soil, and good food. And so whenever we can share that, and that's when people perked up. I was like, look, the only reason we're here is because whether we like it or not, foreigners live in this community, and they're probably going to keep living in this community. So let's start breaking down the barriers, and let's just like get to the point. And the point is, we would all love clean food, clean water, and good, clean soil. That people are healthy and thriving. And then everyone perked up, like, oh, we want that too.
It's
It's like common interest.
I've heard a lot just from you and the few times that I've been around you and heard you speak around these like synchronicities and like following this path and being very adaptable. It seems like that's what's like got you here, and that's what keeps opening doors, and I can reflect that on my life and like see that in my own personal life as well. It's like when I've had like such a narrow focus of like, I want to get there and this is how I'm going to get there, oftentimes it's just a struggle, and I find I'm like not getting anywhere. So yeah, like coming back to self and listening and just being adaptive has opened doors up for me. Have you always been that way? Is that something you've learned, how to listen to like your soul or yourself, or I don't know how you would describe that?
Yeah, I think I've been really self-determined for a lot. I just remember my parents always being, you're so stubborn, because I would always just do what I felt that I was supposed to. Like, I had no reason in the world to go to Austin, Texas for college. Like, I'd never visited there, but I was like, I'm supposed to go there. And I ended up being in a cultural anthropology class there that changed my entire worldview and really led me to where, and it was like my last class in college. And I think that, following that intuition and not really understanding what the stairway is, not being able to see the full staircase, but you can see that that's the direction you're going. And oddly enough, I find that the ceremonies and the prayer really help to stay in that sense of intuition and that flow. We look at coca leaves to make all major decisions. To do the concert, where to get land, should we travel to the U.S., is this the right accountant? Like really practical day things. We utilize coca to share the answer. It's a really feminine way. And but oddly enough, I found that as I had something like meaningful, I'm finding it harder to listen to the synchronicities. It's actually been a little bit more challenging to be like relax into that traveler's mind, right? Like the traveler's mind's like, I met this person and they want me to go to Bolivia, so I'm going. And then, but when you have like something that could be lost, it's like I definitely find myself in that struggle often of listening to that intuition versus the logical mind. And I find that it really comes in with good that's the key. Some of the things that are in between the lines, that when often people don't understand why I'm making a decision, they're like, that's not doing that concert was not practical. Like, I can tell you that was not practical. Like, anything that we had saved to build an indigenous temple, we invested that in a concert, and it was like looking very likely that was not going to come back. And then we listened to the intuition. Well, we were supposed to do this, and how do we get creative with solutions and achieve what we're aiming for? And so I think that's where that balance of the logic and the feminine nature come in. It's like, go for it. Like, if you have that heart pulse, that like thing that says yes, like, go for it. Don't doubt it. Just because we don't understand like how that's gonna go into our retirement plan, but like, you'll figure it out along the way, and just keep your eye on the target. Keep your eye, and it's a moving target too, and understand that it's moving, and keep your eye on that, and just keep nurturing yourself, and then make logical decisions. The ego is good to make those logical decisions to achieve this more fluid piece.
So you don't have to break apart on the rocks by like jumping off this cliff, because I feel like I need to. And like, I've done that many times in my life, and I would, like, one thing for me is like, when I was like single or younger, like, those decisions were easier to make. And then in relationship, and now like this broader vision in which we're narrowing in on how we want to like manifest in the world, there's like meeting practical needs with like being adaptive and responsive. And so like, how to like maintain that archetype of the fool, yet like bring in like the adult, like the north, the like king archetype too, and be able to care for yourself and others that need that. And so thank you for that reflection.
My father-in-law is a really good model for that. I'm like happy to have a model in my life. And I deeply wish that upon others, to have solid elders in their life. So I watch my father-in-law, and he just navigates the city like a champ. He doesn't know how to speak Spanish. He doesn't really know how to like, definitely not English, can navigate an airport, get where he needs to go. And so I watch him now, and he does it in this really intuitive way. When I ask him a question, I'm all nervous. I'm like, should we do the concert in Huaran, or should we do it in Cusco? I'm all nervous because it's got to work out. And he's like, what does your heart say? And I'm like, Cusco. And then we check the coconut, and he's like, Cusco. But all logic signs is like, no, do it somewhere in the valley. It's going to make more sense. But then that's where that mystery brings you to the next stage, because you didn't you thought your intention was this, but it was really this. And you find out at the next step that it was a lot bigger than we thought.
And there's like a weird sense of being responsible in following intuition like that, and learning how to really discern, because it ends up being the most beneficial thing for yourself and for others when you're really connected to like a soul knowing, because the soul is so interconnected. It knows what's like best for...
It's the way nature's speaking to us.
Nature's speaking to us.
Definitely.
Exactly.
And we each have our unique like, niche in an ecosystem, and we have to really fulfill that niche, we have to bring our soul gifts forward as completely as possible. So listening to the ways that we're being asked to bring that forward, even if they're completely unexpected and somewhat ridiculous.
It gets you to the next piece, and you start to see, like a spider web. There's the web, but only when the light tints on it at a certain, you can see the light, and you see the whole web there. And it's kind of like that. It's like you're walking along the web, and then all of a sudden the light shines. You're like, oh, I see. And then it goes dim again. You're like
totally.
Totally.
Navigating by the stars.
Right. Sometimes it feels, like you're opening a door, walking through a door, and you thought it was to go through that door, but it's really actually just so you had access to all these other doors that you didn't know were there. But then you go through one of those doors.
Agreed.
Completely.
So, I know I want to lift up some of the current workshops you're doing, and how people can get involved in your work. But before that, it's a question that we've sort of decided we're going to ask everyone that we interview, and that is something we think about a lot, which is the world we know is possible. The vision of the world we know is possible through this learning about, ecocentrism, connecting to the earth, connecting to community. What we've seen doesn't work, and how to live into that vision. And so, from your perspective, from the work you've been doing, what is the world you know is possible? And you can talk about that in the local community and also the globe, the whole world. If everyone saw through your lens of knowing, or through your community's lens of knowing, the vision that you have, what could be possible?
I'm just gonna share with you what just came to my mind. So like bizarre, like it's kind of like Burning Man.
Yeah. Totally.
So like my experience of Burning Man is that everybody there is not limited by creativity. They're not limited by law. They're not limited, and so you can lose your goggles, and in 10 seconds, someone's like, "Hey, man, would you need some goggles today?" You're like just in this interesting creative vortex, you know, where everyone's on purpose. You know, of course, there's some people like silly around and not quite on purpose, you know. But for the most part, when your creativity is unlimited, you're not worried about resources. You're not worried about all of these external things. You're all creating a city together. You're creating your clothes and your costume. No one's judging you, you know. And so I think that is kind of an interesting metaphor for that, and I think that's why the festival culture is so appealing to so many people, because you can kind of break out of those limitations that would normally make us nervous and not go for our dreams. And I say that because it was like experiences like that that helped me really think outside of the box, and I've seen how challenging it is for my partner, who's lived to like in a way where he's not quite sure if he's going to be provided for, and he's not quite sure when he moved to the city if he has food, you know. And I see the difference of that mindset, and it's been this interesting work together to really get past that and be like, you can actually create what you want to see in the world, and we're not limited by that. If you look around nature, there's so much abundance. There's not a lack of abundance in nature. It's like the way that we perceive resources is. And so what I see is that it's very possible for people to live in a connected way, culturally diverse. Like there's not one way, there's many ways, in a way that respects others and actually celebrates the gems of diversity. And I see that we could absolutely live in a place with abundant water, abundant food, and even the big corporations in the world, they could keep making money, the same amount of money. Switch it to solar, or whatever. Like if that's the ultimate dream of that, you know, like could we do that just on a good scale would be great, you know. And so I feel like there's a way for each of us to be finding our purpose and to be on purpose and to be supported through both community and ecology in that. And there's, you know, you just look at nature and some things are overtaking the others, but for the most part there's a coexistence, you know, and a respect of diversity and a need for the diversity. And then you have a purpose.
Right.
Definitely. And that's that felt sense. I share a similar felt sense or idea of what's possible. And to me it seems like if we really leaned into that, you know, got out of this idea of separation, got out of this idea of scarcity, really like connected to the fact that like we're infinite creators, like out here. Like it's an incredible gift we have to be conscious beings here on the planet. And we can use that to destroy the world like we've seen, or we can do that to like build abundance and beauty that we've never even thought possible before. And so when I hear that, it's so exciting to me because I feel that to be true, and I also sense that like I don't even know like the immense beauty that would look like if everyone was really in their place of gift and creating and giving and sharing. It seems really incredible.
Back to the metaphor of Burning Man related to that. I experienced that for the first time last year being at Burning Man, and there was so much beauty and freedom and possibility, and I also had this sadness during parts of it around like the topic of access and like who's able to be there, and this sense of like, oh my God, this place, this community would be so much more beautiful if all beings who wanted to be there could be there, because the art that would be there, the music that would be there, the community that would be there would be so much more beautiful than it is now. And that kind of reminds me of that. It's like we can't even imagine when all beings have access to liberation and the freedom to express themselves and the mutual support to be able to be in full expression and creation. It's just so much more beautiful than we can even hold and imagine.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of a center thing that inspired us at the concert. So we like at a certain point we're like, how can we make this like, even $25? Like how do we make that accessible to Peruvians? Like that's not accessible. And so then we like thought of an idea. Thanks to my friend Nick, we thought of an idea of like, all right, let's like put out this whole donation thing. And then people can watch this from afar. And then for every time someone donates, we're going to donate that ticket to a local. And so like we'd rather fill the seats than not fill the seats, you know. And so we ended up being, I think it was an equal match of people tickets sold to, an equal match of Peruvians that arrived. And so we were trying to think of creative ways. We do the same thing in our courses. How do we how do we create that access? And then more and more, the money's gonna not be the thing, right? You know,
other means of exchange.
and it's really about that inspiration. How do you spark that deep well of inspiration? And then someone who has less access will actually recognize that they don't. You know, there is systematically less access, and then there's human potential. And so that's where this like community solutions come from, and that's when we recognize like common issues that we had together, and we bridge together, and we create this immaculate, amazing movement and solution together. And so it's like in permaculture, like the challenge is always the solution. And so I agree. How do we have more access to share access to, and that's really a responsibility of like, I don't only go to a festival for my own benefit. What do I get out of that? And how do I share that in my community? Right? And that's how you become like a pollinator, and you're to the best ability utilizing that resources. And it's also not like being shameful, like, oh, I do have access and others don't. It's like, I'm going to take advantage of that, and then I'm going to share it in this way.
Responsibility, exactly. Privilege as opportunity and responsibility, right?
Sorry about the technical difficulties. As we were editing our video, we realized that it cut out right as Carolina was describing her amazing offerings. And we really wanted to have the opportunity to have you all hear about that, and then also learn how you can get in contact with her, because she's doing amazing things down in the Sacred Valley of Peru. So we got her back on a phone call. Unfortunately, we are now both in different locations, so we couldn't meet up in person. But here she is to describe her current offerings, what she has coming up for you to get involved with, and how you can contact her.
Thank you all for reaching out again. I'm here in San Francisco right now. I actually just brought Maestro Juan Gabriel, to North America. So it's something I didn't even mention before. But we are in North America right now, and if anyone wants to meet up with us, we're in San Francisco. We have an event tomorrow, though I'm not sure if you'll see this tomorrow. And we have events. We're going to the Global Earth Repair Conference from the 3rd to the 5th of May. Then we're headed out to Seattle, I think on the 10th. And then we're heading into Ashland for Mother's Day. And in each one of those locations, we're offering not only ceremonies, Andean fire ceremonies, but we're also offering talks on how to integrate Andean practices into our daily life, and how can we do that in a way that respects Indigenous culture. And we're really excited. We're calling this talk Cross-Cultural Pollination. So we're really excited to be making this new offering here in North America right now. I think it's really important to learn how we can benefit in our own lives from these traditions, but do so in a way that respects Indigenous culture. And what I wanted to share with y'all, what we're doing in Peru this year, we're really taking a step up and leveling up in our work. And from September 10th to the 18th, we're doing a new offering. It's called the Ecology of Kinship. This is not only an opportunity to dive deeper into Indigenous wisdom, to learn the practices of the Andes, how they may benefit our lives, to maintain a deeper state of connection with the earth through spiritual practice. But we want to back that up with physical practices as well. Like, how can we stay in that state of deep connection with the planet through a deeper lens and understanding of Indigenous herbs and native foods? We're going to be learning with master ecologists, Quechua ecologists, learning the theory, and then putting it into practice on the land, which is an ecological sanctuary where Indigenous elders can share their wisdom. So we're putting it in practice there, and then we're continuing the study. If you want to stay on for 7 weeks beyond this retreat, it's a 8-week internship where we're actually going to study native foods and herbs, and actually learn what are the most high profit recipes that we can make out of Andean products, because a lot of our neighbors are using monoculture and chemical farming. And we really want to help bridge that wisdom of like, all right, you already know how to grow these amazing foods that are considered superfoods around the world. So what are the products and recipes that we can bring together to really inspire you that monoculture corn is not the only way, and that if we create biodiverse farms, there is a market, there's a global market that's desiring these really healthy, abundant foods. And so again, it's theory, learning from Quechua teachers, practice, putting it into practice on the land, and then project. What's the study? Can you help us study and learn with our neighbors? And so this is an intercultural, it's always both an intercultural retreat, which is a 10-day, and then the 8-week program is an extension of that. And we're recreating that model again in December. But this time the focus, rather than food and herbs, the focus is going to be on plant dyes. So we're going to be meeting with master weavers, some of the best in all of Peru. The dates are December 29th to January 6th. So over the New Year's. Again, we're learning the spiritual practices. We're meeting with the master weavers. We're sitting with sacred plants and going through our own healing. And if you decide to stay on for the 8-week program after this, then we are actually going out to the high jungle. We're seeing these plant dyes in their natural form, in their natural environment. We're bringing the trimmings from there to the land, Sacred Valley, and making a biodome, like an atrium inside of a dome, so that we can restore these indigenous plant dyes, and that our master weavers can come down, teach us this art of weaving, teach us how to extract the plants from nature in a way that regenerates nature. And we're going to be doing experiments on how can we know that they already are plant dyes for the fibers. Can we make those into plant dyes for paints, for artistic paints? Can we make those into plant dyes for paints that are painting houses? So really the end to the means of each of these retreats is really to see how we can create further impact within our own community and create a model within our community that shows that there is indeed a market for ecological regenerative projects, products, and community-based initiatives. So we would love for each of you to part of that for 10 days, or if it's for 8 weeks, like we're here in Peru, to collaborate with you and to bridge that wisdom between ancestral wisdom and modern innovation.
Yes. So beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, and these are just, I just have to say, these are amazing offerings. I highly recommend anyone watching this to look into this. If you've been, seeking indigenous ways of knowing, or you want to help like bridge this gap or understand this world and how you can start to move that in your life, like not only is the place, the Sacred Valley, incredible, but the work that Carolina is doing is amazing. And this is something Ollie and I is definitely considering going back and working with her more fully to really, dive deeper into what she's got going on. So I highly recommend you do that as well.
Yes, definitely. And thank you so much, Carolina, for this modeling of these different ways, these different avenues of bringing spirit into form. And I loved the way that you really want to make things tangible, and how can we live into this day to day. It's very inspiring for us. And I know for so many who are grappling with these big questions of how do I live in these ways, but wondering how to do that day to day. And these two offerings are such great examples of learning ways to do that. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you all. Thank you for the work you do. Just, walking, coming around the world and in a good way, and speaking with people and really opening up that dialogue. I think it's a really important thing to create more platforms for these conversations. And we're sitting here in the US right now, on the other side of this video, sitting here in the US right now, really sitting with these conversations as well. How can we actually integrate these teachings into a daily life whenever we live in a place that's all about consumption, and that's all about, these interactions based on monetary relationships. So we're sitting here, we learn a lot every time we come. And so I really appreciate that you're creating a platform for us to speak about these things. And I hope to see you all down here. It would be amazing to be in the garden with you. And so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and can you tell us how we can get a hold of you? You have an email address, or what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
So you can find more information on reviveolution.net, which is reviveolution.net. And then if you add an @gmail.com to that, that's our email. I know it's a little unprofessional, but it's reviveolution.net@gmail.com. So
Nice.
email there as well, and both remember the website and the email all in one.
Yes, perfect.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carolina.
Yeah.
Thank
It's
you.
been a pleasure, and can't wait
Yeah.
to our paths connecting in unexpected ways.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And enjoy the rest of your travels in the States.
Yes.
Muchas gracias.